Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I'm Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for raising your health IQ with us coast to coast and around the world. More than 150 countries, and making this one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. Today, the focus is on your gut. It is going to be a mailbag bonanza with all of your questions for the one, the only, Prince of Porcelain, number one of number two, the OG of the GI, and an astronomer specializing in Uranus. With that, we welcome the one, the only, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz back to the exam room. Hello, sir. Good to see you.
Chuck, we've crossed into new territory, I think. We're getting into astronomy. I mean, I have like a 9-year-old son who cracks the same joke. It's got to appreciate it.
Guilty. Hey, look, dude, I always say that, the IQ goes up, the maturity level goes down whenever you and I get together. So
we got to have some fun.
Absolutely, we do. All right, so here's the deal. We have a whole bunch of leftover questions from people who have left comments after previous episodes. We always say, if we didn't get to your question today, have no fear, leave it below, and we will get to it on a future episode. And today is a make good, so you're ready for a little bit of everything?
Yeah, we're doing the leftovers. Leftovers can be good, Chuck.
I'm a big fan of leftovers.
Good. I mean, starchy foods, they actually create resistant starch with leftovers. So
yeah. Speaking of which, I've got some leftover potatoes. I'm about to heat those up after we're done. Those are great. By the way, I did a show recently with Dr. Hannah Kaliova where she was explaining that I think it's like the glycemic load of a potato goes down after it's been in the fridge for 24 hours. I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah. That's the reorganization. It's retrograde resistant starch. So they call it retrograde because you created starch, and now that starch is actually going back to a more whole form that is resistant to digestion. And the cool thing about resistant starch is it behaves a lot like fiber, but it's not exactly the same as fiber. And so what that means is that it actually gets to a different part of your colon and feeds the microbes there. So the research is suggesting to us that fiber tends to feed, like as soon as it hits the colon, the microbes chew it up, whereas resistant starch seems to go a little bit further and feed the microbes that are starving in other parts. So it's nice to have both fiber and resistant starch.
Amen to that. All right, look at that. We're already getting smarter. All right, the first question comes to us from Violet, wondering about microbiome diversity. She says the concept of gut microbiome diversity is often mentioned, but what does diversity mean in this context, and why is it so darn important, Dr. B?
All right, well, microbiome diversity. So, here's the thing. Let's start, zoom out, forget the microbiome for a moment, zoom out, and let's just talk about ecosystems anywhere in the world. It could be the Great Barrier Reef, it could be the Amazon rainforest, it could be the area that surrounds your home. As I look out the window at the trees outside of my home right here. And so within any ecosystem, diversity is the measure of health within the ecosystem. It makes it stronger. It makes it resilient. Things are basically connected and interacting together in a way that is more powerful. When the ecosystem becomes barren and less diverse, it is weak and fragile. And those are the rules of ecology that are transferable and applicable to our gut microbiome, because our gut microbiome is an ecosystem. In the same way that the forest outside my window, or the Great Barrier Reef, or the Amazon, the gut microbiome is an ecosystem. So when it is diverse and abundant, it is strong, it is resilient. All of these different microbes, they have unique skill sets. They have unique ways in which they're there and capable of stepping up and providing support to your body. And so you want as many of them present and on board as possible. So generally speaking, gut diversity is a measure of health that we sort of use as a universal measure of gut health. There's other ways that we could look at gut health, but this is sort of the classic universal way that we look at it because of this rule that we have.
All right, next up, I have not heard of this. Maxing fiber. Are you familiar with this term, maxing fiber?
It's a TikTok thing.
Oh, is that what that is? See, I'm not cool like that. I play like I'm immature, but I'm an old man. Jasmine, do you think the fad of maxing fiber or gut cleanse regimens actually help or hurt gut health?
Well, so yeah, so the concept is fiber maxing. It's been trending on TikTok. Fiber is like having a moment. And I see people in all corners of the internet starting to talk about fiber. And I think dialogue is important and good. And so this idea of fiber maxing, though, among the kids is basically like crank up the fiber as hard as you can. There's another thing which is like beans are having a moment, Chuck.
Hmm. We're
So
going for
and
the
it's kind of
bean.
like aligned with the same thing of fiber maxing, where basically the kids are saying 2 cups of beans a day. So, and I was asked actually by Fox News to comment on this.
Hmm.
And my response was that I love it. And I'm excited that beans are having a moment. And I'm excited that fiber is having a moment. But to have 2 cups a day, you have to build to that. So, like fiber maxing or 2 cups of beans a day, do I support that? Yes, but I need to show you how to get there. Because if you go too hard too fast, you're going to hurt yourself. You're not going to feel well. It's conceptually similar, and you've heard me say this so many times, Chuck, but it's conceptually similar to exercise. I'll go to the gym and I'm going to work with an amount of weight that's appropriate for what I'm capable of doing. I'm not going to go and lift the heaviest, like the strongest person in the gym, they're lifting with something different than I am. That's okay. We're going to work towards that. That's what you got to do with fiber. That's what you got to do with beans.
All right. So, how long do you think it would take to get to 2 cups of beans per day for the average person? Because, I mean, I would think that a lot of kids do that like 0 to 60 in no time flat kind of deal. And they just don't think about what's that's actually going to do to their system. But for people that want to take the slow and steady approach, how long do you think it would take for the gut to get adjusted to be able to handle that?
Well, I think that like having a general methodology is more important than like setting a specific time frame, because the issue is we all have a different starting point, and we also have a different time frame for how our gut heals. It's not categorically, it's not linear, and it's not the same for all of us. So you sort of need these rules. Generally speaking, Chuck, 4 weeks, you can make dramatic changes to the gut microbiome in 4 weeks, for sure. In some cases, 2 weeks. But for the person who has inflammatory bowel disease or a complex digestive disorder, it's going to take them some period of time to build this up. So I would love to sit here and say generally it's 4 weeks, but there's not really a universal answer. The answer is that you start low, you go slow. When your body gives you feedback that it was too much, you slow it down a little bit. And if your body's not giving you that feedback, you can continue to accelerate and push forward. And that's the same way that you would approach things with exercise.
Is it realistic for somebody with IBS to think that they can get to that level of fiber intake per day?
Eventually,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely. Because you may be so um, take a person with IBS, take a person with inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, okay? Let's continue with our exercise analogy. Imagine for a moment that I hurt my shoulder. And so it's beat up and it's damaged. All right? Now, in that moment, I'm not able to lift over the top of my head. Like, in fact, I can't lift my shoulder at all. I need to rehabilitate my shoulder. That's where the person with IBS or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease or other complex digestive disorders, that's where they are, right? They're not ready to go lifting. They're trying to get basic function back. So there's the rehabilitation process. But if I rehabilitate my shoulder, which does require effort and an approach and sticking with it, but if I do that, then I get the function back. The function is restored. I'm now able to lift my arm over my head, and now it's time for me to start adding weights. Small weights at first, larger weights later. I will build it back up. Give me a year. I could have a bad shoulder today. Give me a year. I'll rehabilitate, I'll restore that function, and then I'll grow it strong again, right? And the same is true with the gut. Is like you can rehabilitate it, you can restore the function, and then you can grow it strong. And if you give yourself time and you're consistent with things, you will get there for sure.
I tell you that my wife just had shoulder surgery. Like you were like laying out her rehab like pretty accurately, man. And it is amazing how far she's come in like a month. But man, you want to talk about like zero range of motion? Poor thing. She was in such pain for like the first couple weeks. Couldn't do this. And she said like even when she would go to PT, and then she would have like a literally like a 1 pound barbell dumbbell, and she would say it was like holding 50 pounds. And now she's up to like 5 pounds, and she's got more range of motion. It's really been incredible to watch, to be honest with you. Shoulder injuries, they're no joke. So
Well,
anyway,
we take these things for granted, right? We take these things for granted that like our body was designed to work in a certain way, and the truth is that sometimes there's effort that's required in order to restore those functions to our body that many of us take for granted.
all right. So I want to stick with the gym analogy, pivot to a question from Savannah. This goes right in there. She's wondering, for the fit-minded person, the person who does go to the gym, how does exercise affect microbiome?
In a beautiful way. Exercise is great for the microbiome. So it depends on what kind of exercise you're doing. We have data where a rugby team that was doing strength-based resistance training, they were able to have shifts and changes to their microbiome that led to increases in short-chain fatty acids. We have other research where they analyzed microbiome specimens of marathon runners, and the marathon runners, they had a microbiome that was reducing lactic acid. So the point is that these microbes in this ecosystem, they are constantly adapting to their environment. We have the ability to shape that environment for them. One of the most powerful ways, perhaps the most powerful way, is with the food that we eat, but it's not the only way. So let's not ignore these other things that include exercise and sleep and circadian rhythm and human connection and spiritual connection and so much more. So, and speaking of which, like as I rattle these off, I'm like, it's easy for me to rattle off all the other things because this is basically what's in my brand new book, Plant Powered Plus, which is available for pre-order. And so, and it's got the nutrition protocol, but it also has all these other things. And that's, to me, there's an important conversation that we need to have about this.
And we've got ourselves a link for you to pre-order your copy coming out early January, correct? What's the exact date?
January 13th.
There it is, January
Yeah.
13th.
But if you pre-order today, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm happy to share that can get you started on your journey. So like I have all these pre-order incentives, including ways for you to upgrade your home, which I've gotten amazing feedback on, as well as you can get the introduction to the book, start reading it today. And then most recently, Chuck, I launched a 5-day free course called the 5-Day Anti-Inflammatory Reset. And that's available to anyone who pre-orders the book. So quite simply, come to my website, theguthealthmd.com, and enter in your receipt, and you will get all of these things instant access.
Ooh, I should probably go ahead and do that today. Let me go ahead and pre-order my copy as soon as we're done. All right, James has a question, my friend. I don't know if you talk about this in Plant Powered Plus, but he has a sweet tooth, and he's wondering how artificial sweeteners impact gut bacteria.
Yeah, so this is a quite area of lively discussion. And so there's sufficient data at this point to say that, like, I don't want to lump them all in together because they're not all exactly the same. But these artificial sweeteners, there's sufficient data that with several of them, saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, and these are popular brands in a lot of stuff, the data would suggest they're not good for the microbiome. Now the question is, like, if you have a Diet Coke, are you inflicting harm on your body? Like sufficiently to the point where I would tell you you're making a horrible choice to have one Diet Coke. Well, like I don't think that's the way it works. One is not by itself the issue. The issue is the person who's building a habit where they're having Diet Coke like 7 days a week. And basically from my perspective, that choice put on repeat is reinforcing itself in the microbiome. And I don't like the direction that things go when you add these artificial sweeteners. So from my perspective, I think it's better for us to generally avoid these things. Stevia and monk fruit are not the same as the artificial sweeteners. They come from natural sources, and the data are not as concerning. There are some people that would absolutely argue that you should avoid stevia and monk fruit. And, these are shades of gray, Chuck. So, like many of the people who argue in defense of artificial sweeteners, the reason why they're defending them is because they're putting them up against sugar. and they're saying sugar's worse. Okay, I buy it. I'm on board with that. Sugar is worse. But we have other choices. It's not like these are the only two choices that exist, right? We could do things that don't involve artificial sweeteners. Like if you're having a drink, couldn't we take a glass of water and put a squeeze of fruit into it? Or allow the fruit to like sit in a pitcher and basically infuse. This is what they do at spas. They're not using artificial sweeteners in spas. So you can create a spa-like environment in your kitchen, enjoy delicious water, hydrate yourself, make yourself healthier, get the polyphenols that are good for your microbiome, and not have to, not have to consume the artificially sweetened beverage. Which, by the way, there's other issues with those beverages as well. It's not just the artificial sweeteners.
Well, you said that you feel like sugar is worse than a lot of these artificial sweeteners. Like, so
Yeah,
what's the
I
theory
think it
there?
is.
Because I think that somebody who is unfamiliar with that would be like, but sugar is natural and artificial is, by its very definition, unnatural. So why is sugar the worst of two evils here?
Because you can't categorically go and say that everything that's natural is automatically healthy and everything that's unnatural is automatically unhealthy. You could take anything, Chuck. You could take kale and eat kale, which is very natural, but you could do it in an unnatural way, and you could get sick and inflict harm on yourself, right? So, and but that would be starting with something that's totally natural, but you're doing it in an unnatural way. To consume sugar at the extent that we are consuming it in America today is unnatural. So the sugar itself may be natural and consumed in moderation, small amounts, I'm not concerned about. But that's not where we're at. People are consuming pounds and pounds and pounds of this stuff. And so that's where we need to intervene and make a change.
I remember years ago at this point, I did a segment on the local ABC station here in Washington, D.C. about how much sugar people eat in a year. And I actually dragged in a cinder block as an example. Like, you literally eat the weight of a cinder block in sugar every single year, that typical person. And for some people, it's much more than that. Like, you've picked up a cinder block, you know how heavy those things are.
Yeah, totally. No, it's crazy. And I think like, to me the arguments, I think when people talk within our space about the issues with sugar, with fat, with salt, like I think it's important to understand that it's about balance, right? Like with these things. If you hypothetically did not like it would be quite weird to argue plant-based but also argue low carb, right? So I don't think people are arguing that you're going to be zero sugar, but I think that the the added sugars and the amount in which they're being consumed is not in balance. And so I think like really these arguments are about trying to restore people to balance.
All right, let's switch gears. Familiar name to you, Liam here. We've talked about probiotics, we've talked about prebiotics, but Liam is wondering about postbiotic therapy, wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that is and whether or not there's actual benefit to it.
Postbiotic is a quite broad term. So just to fill this in, prebiotics are food for the microbes. All right, they have shown benefits to human health. Probiotics are the microbes themselves that have been proven to be beneficial to human health. And then postbiotics is what happens when those microbes are fed. So they create new bioactives. The classic are the short chain fatty acids, but there are many others that they produce. They're like a little chemical factory. They're constantly at work creating stuff. So, so to take this this complex output from these microbes and categorize them in some sort of universal way is very hard to do. You really need to get detailed. What are we talking about, and how are we talking about getting it? So my entire platform has been about heralding the benefits of short chain fatty acids, and the way that I say to get them is through fiber. Fiber is the way. Fiber is the prebiotic. It meets your microbes, and then the short chain fatty acids get released as a result of that. Whereas that's very different. You haven't heard me out there saying that people should take short chain fatty acid supplements. I haven't been saying that. Why? Because it's not the same. So I think that this world of postbiotics, we make postbiotics through our microbiome and the consumption of food. So it starts with food. And then when it comes to supplementation, I think we need to get it's not to say that they're categorically good or categorically bad. It's a big category. That is a big category. And so they need to be assessed on their own merit individually.
All right, let's take a question from Raymond. Everybody loves him. How close are we to being able to, quote, map somebody's microbiome to truly create a personalized diet for optimal health?
That's a complex question. So it's a great question.
So maybe people don't love Raymond. Maybe they just like him. I don't know. Is that too much heat there in this single question?
How old was that show? Is that 30 years old, Chuck? Everyone gonna get that one?
God, okay. You know, that's two swings at me today. Just know you come at the king. And I'm just gonna leave it.
You best not miss. What show? That's what I'm saying. That's The Wire. Yeah. You just did another show. All right.
It's also 30 years old. What does that say about me?
23 to be precise, but okay. All right. So what was the question that you even asked me, Chuck? I've totally lost
how
there.
close are we being able to map somebody's microbiome to truly create a personalized diet?
I think that's a complex question. So there are efforts that exist. Obviously, I'm involved with Zoe to try to understand the intersection between the gut microbiome and food choices and how that influences our physiology and our health. And the Zoe research that we've done has shown that personalization, you can change certain outputs in terms of a person's health. But it really, I think that the complexity of this is the amount of data that is required, not just microbiome data. You need to really have granular, high quality information about what people are eating, how they're living their lives. And ideally, you would need to longitudinally follow this over time. So I think the point from my perspective is that we have early versions of this, and I think that there's a signal there that is encouraging to me. But at the same time, I write books because there are rules of nature. And I think that those rules of nature can be taken for the individual and applied to their own life in a way that fits and makes sense for them. And so to me, the starting point can be books, can be educating and empowering yourself, can be knowing what are the rules of how this works from a health perspective, and then applying those concepts. And the idea of using your microbiome to determine that, I would be cautious to overrule using a microbiome test because there's a lot of them out there and most of them I don't support. So I would be very cautious to use a microbiome test that overrules other information that you can get about yourself, how you respond to things, etc.
All right, let's grab a couple of more before we set you free, my good man. We have a question. Oh, this is right up your alley here for Plant Power Plus. Isabella writes, I recently switched to a low-fiber, high-protein diet and feel fantastic. Yet, I hear you talk about inflammation that is caused by these types of diets. So how can a person feel better, yet actually maybe doing detriment to their insides?
Yeah. So in a perfect world, I would love for that diet to be addressing the fiber that's missing. And because I think that that's an important part of maintaining health. If you take a step back and you look at people who follow high protein, low fiber diets and you track out what happens to them, many of them end up with gut issues. So now perhaps that doesn't arrive on day one, but if you give it time, people ultimately end up struggling with health-related issues. They look great. They're competing in bodybuilding contests, right? They're in peak shape from a fitness perspective in terms of how they appear and what they're able to do in a gym. But that's not the same as what your gut is able to do. And when you starve your microbes by depriving them of fiber, they're going to grow weaker, right? Like that would be like working out all these different parts of your body, but totally neglecting this one part. And that's kind of what's happening. And some people do feel well when they do this if they have a weak gut at baseline. And so the issue is like, let's go back to the exercise analogy where I'm not telling people to put yourself through pain. That's certainly not my argument. I'm telling people that rehabilitation is the way. But if you have a bad shoulder, then you're going to say, I feel better when I don't move my shoulder, right? That's what you would say because your shoulder's not well. Does that mean that you should not move your shoulder for the rest of your life? Or does it make sense to rehabilitate the shoulder so you can get the function back? But the rehabilitation will create challenges, like what you described your wife is going through, where it's like it's not easy to go through rehab, right? So if a person has a weak and damaged gut, running away from fiber is not the long-term solution. It's, if anything, going to put you at risk for greater problems later on.
Does it take longer for somebody who is eating that high protein, low fiber diet to restore optimum microbiome compared to a person that's, maybe just eating that 50-50, maybe slightly healthier than average standard American diet?
Does it take longer for them to restore it? Well, so like the standard American diet is the argument for like possibly the worst microbiome diet that exists. So many people who move towards a high protein, low fiber diet, they're at least cleaning their diet up in the process. They're not going like straight, standard American diet when they do this. So the issue is to get to high protein. You either are using lots of protein supplements, eating ultra processed foods that are high in protein, or focusing on animal products for the majority of people. Can you strategically do this with plant-based stuff? Yes, you can, but you have to be strategic about it. It takes some learning to do this because it's not the common approach. So, and the problem is that like basically that orientation, like protein powder supplements, ultra processed foods high in protein, and then like animal products, there's really none of that I would argue is intended for gut health. So, and that's now dominating the diet. So I'm of the belief, Chuck, that you can look great, you can feel great, you can be in the best shape of your life, and you can also have the best gut health of your life, and you don't need to deprive and sacrifice those things. So, and I think it's possible through a properly balanced plant-based diet, and plant-based being like a quite broad term.
All right, final question goes to Grace. Can gut-brain signaling explain why stress can trigger IBS or other digestive flare-ups?
Yeah, it can. So actually, this is one of the topics that's in chapter 8 of my brand new book. And I don't know if I've told you this, Chuck. Perhaps I have. Chapter 8 is my masterpiece.
Ooh, okay. Talk to me. Why?
It's my most proud chapter that I've ever written.
Really?
So I'd have to go back. I think I wrote 9 chapters for Fiber Fueled, and I think there were like 10 or 11 for the Fiber Fueled cookbook. And there's 9 in the new book, and this is, I think, the greatest chapter that I've ever written. So, and the reason why is because we're getting real. And we're talking about stuff that I just think that we need to discuss in terms of what's important for our health, but it's not exactly the same as just like, hey, here's the rules of nutrition, right? We're sort of getting a little more personal. I get more personal. I talk about myself. And the entire chapter is about the gut-brain connection. And that's what this question is about. It's tapping into. And just know there's ways, this is all that's covered in chapter 8 of Plant Powered Plus, my new book. There are ways in which the gut influences the brain powerfully. There are ways in which the brain influences the gut equally powerfully. And we want control over this. And we live in a world that it's it's a lot out of control. And we are in sympathetic overdrive. And there are consequences to this. And it leaves us stressed out, anxious, affects our mood, and it affects our gut. And that has a ripple effect throughout our entire body in terms of our health. So the point from my perspective is that we can understand these connections and then take action and pull levers, make choices that allow us to heal and restore. And that's really what we're talking about in the book.
Was it hard for you to write about yourself? I know that in the past, when I've been asked to write something about something that I've gone through that is kind of on a personal level, like I kind of struggled, and it took me a while to get comfortable doing it. What was it like for you?
I'm a very private person. It's not something that I feel naturally inclined to do. But that being said, I feel like I'm here to try to help people in their journey. And I felt that sharing my own story was a powerful way that I could fulfill that and show them that these aren't like ideas and just things I'm throwing out there. These are things that I've seen happen with many people, but like really starting with myself. And so, like, my journey to healing required these steps. It wasn't just changing my diet. My journey to healing really required these steps. And that's, I think, other people will see a side of me that they didn't see before. The hardest part of all this, Chuck, was it's easy to sort of write these things anonymously. The hardest part was recording the audiobook. And because I'm reading the chapter and it gets to these moments, there's absolutely parts of the chapter that are, fun and light and conversational. And, again, this chapter to me is my masterpiece. But there's also chapters where, like, it's like deep inside of me and things that I'm still dealing with and processing. And I think that, like, if people get the audiobook, they're going to hear that. And it'll be very obvious. Like, you'll be able to tell where I'm at just based upon my voice. We did it in one take. Like, basically, we recorded it, and because it was just like quite raw.
Yeah. Well, brother, I'd look forward to reading that and listening to it. And congratulations, I guess, just to be real with you on being vulnerable. I think that's what makes you so relatable and why you have such a big following. Not just because of your splendid personality, but, I think that when we can peel back the curtain a little bit, it helps us build that relationship with the people who are watching and listening and reading, and it makes it all the more impactful, man. So I really look forward to reading that chapter, brother.
I mean, I am here to try to help people, and this book I wholeheartedly believe in with every bone in my body, and I wholeheartedly believe that if people do the protocol that's in the back of the book, they will see and feel the difference. But the challenge, Chuck, is getting people there, right? Because doing hard things and making changes, that's not easy for any of us. So to get people there, I needed to get them motivated. And I felt that part of the way I could do that is, part of it is you write a great book, but part of it is the last chapter before the book, you touch them emotionally. And I think in doing that, they then flip the page to the next chapter, which is the protocol, and they're on fire and they're ready to go.
All right. Well, here's the deal. If you go to theguthealthmd.com, that is the website. You can pre-order your copy or click that link down below in the show description and in the episode notes. Brother, this has been a fun episode and an insightful one, an enlightening one, and that's why you're my boy. You're my boy, Blue. There's my final old reference for the day.
Yeah, very good. A little old school action.
Dr. B, the Gut Health MD, the Prince of Poop, the Pharaoh Fiber, the number one of number two, and so many more. The Prince of Porcelain, you name it. You the man. Appreciate you, Dr. B.
See you, buddy. Thanks, everyone.
That's it.